What's up everyone, JayzTwoCents here, and I get to finally do a video about something I've been wanting to do for a while but haven't had the opportunity until now. And that being playing with an external graphics card hooked up to a laptop to see whether or not it's actually beneficial and worth doing. With its unique freeform modular system, the new Mastercase Maker 5 from Cooler Master allows unparalleled flexibility with its adjustable internal layout and exterior customization options. Learn more about how you can start customizing your own case by following the link down in the description. Now today's video is actually featuring the Asus Republic of Gamers XG Station 2, which is a Thunderbolt 3 connected device. It's not their first time doing this. They actually built something like this all the way back in 2007, and they've been kind of revamping it ever since. Now the connection speed of Thunderbolt 3 is actually 40 gigabit per second, which equates to 5 gigabytes per second. Now that's significantly slower than what you get on PCI Express, especially Gen 3 16X, which can give you 16 gigabytes per second each direction of bandwidth. So this Thunderbolt 3 is effectively 3 times slower than what you get with PCI Express. So I guess the question is, and what we're going to be looking at in today's testing, is whether or not putting something like a high-end graphics card in one of these is actually doing yourself a disservice. Now before we talk about that, let's kind of take a quick look around the XG Station. This is actually a very well thought out piece of equipment. It's actually got fans on the top to help exhaust hot air from your open style coolers. But I'm using a Founders Edition card in here because I'm also going to be comparing the results of this to my MSI gaming laptop that has a full-blown GTX 1080. And the base model we're going to be testing here also has a GTX 1060 in there. So the question is, how much improvement are you really getting when you go with something like this? Now it's got its own built-in power supply, supplying up to 500 watts to your graphics card, and it does have dual 6-pin or dual 8-pin power plugs on there. So you're not gonna be able to use something that requires 3 power plugs because this one only has 2, so keep that in mind. Of course, it's got glowing LEDs and it looks very pretty. It's got a nice angular design. It really is well thought out. Even this cathode on the front, which is always lit, is pretty neat looking, especially when it's closed, and that's what you see through the front. Now to be fair, this is more than just a graphics card docking station. It's actually a full-blown connectivity docking station for any Thunderbolt connected device, including Mac. But we're not gonna talk about Mac today. Obviously we're talking about PC, but it is, obviously Mac is kind of the reason why a lot of this even exists, but I digress. It's got 4 USB 3.0s on there. It's got 1 USB 3.0 Type B connector. It's even got a built-in network card, and obviously your graphics card goes in there too. Because the cool thing about this is you can take your Thunderbolt connected device, plug in one Thunderbolt cable like you have right here, and have everything else connected to this guy right here. So you can have monitors hooked up to this, you can have your network cable hooked up to this, you can even have your mouse, your keyboard, headset, USB headset, all hooked up to this. So when you want to go be on the go, you simply unplug your power, unplug your Thunderbolt 3, your laptop is free, and you can go to class, go to work, travel, whatever you want to do. And then when you get home, you just plug 2 cables back into your laptop, power and Thunderbolt, and then everything is up and running as a full-blown workstation. So it's more than just a graphics card connected device. Connected device. Talking's hard. But one thing you have to keep in mind though with that 5 gigabyte per second bandwidth is obviously Thunderbolt networking, Thunderbolt graphics, all the USB connected devices are going to eat up some of that bandwidth. Now the question here is whether or not this is going to slow down high-end graphics cards. At least that's what I had for myself. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the results right here. So the baseline for this test was my MSI GS73 VR Stealth Pro. Longest names ever these days, I swear, but I digress again. You can see the baseline actually wasn't bad. The gaming experience on this laptop is very, very good for what it is, especially with the i7 in there and DDR4. But what happens when you plug a GTX 1080 Founders Edition into the XG Station and start playing on it? Well, you can see there's a bit of a bump, but I'll be honest, it's not as big of a bump as I was hoping for, which then made me go, what happens when I test it with my GT73 VR Titan, which again has an i7, 8 threads of processing power, DDR4, and a full-blown discrete GTX 1080 in there. Now obviously, as you can see, having a GTX 1080 built in to the laptop is giving you a significantly better gaming experience than it is when it's running through Thunderbolt. Now I actually talked to Asus about this, and it kind of makes a lot of sense as to why this is. Now typically you're going to see anywhere between about 30 to maybe 40% of degradation of gaming experience when you're going through Thunderbolt. And that has a lot to do with not only the bandwidth of the cable, it also has to do with the CPU overhead as well, where the CPU is having to also make heads or tails of what's happening with the I/O of this device right here. So not only does the laptop have to say, send a communication to this device saying, hey, here's what's happening, this is going to process it and send it back to the computer, and the computer has to also make heads or tails and process what this is telling it before it can start to render it on your screen. So there's some latency in there, and there's some CPU overhead. Now something I'm going to do to try and measure how much performance we're actually losing by going through Thunderbolt like this with an external graphics card is I took my NVIDIA GTX 1060, their reference card. It's not a Founders for the 1060, I didn't call it Founders. And I put that inside of the XG Station 2 here. And I'm gonna compare these results by running the discrete external versus the discrete internal to see what kind of performance delta there is. Here's the 1080 I took out of there right there. You're definitely not getting the full potential or your full money's worth when you put a 1080 into a solution like this and start running it on a laptop. I ran the same tests and the couple of benchmarks I'm using here, and unfortunately we saw once again a degradation of performance, which shows that obviously running over a Thunderbolt cable is unfortunately not going to realize the full potential of the graphics card. So if I had in the back of my mind kind of thought that maybe this would make a good benchmarking solution for graphics card testing. Nope, not at all. Obviously, it's not going to be indicative of what real performance is going to be with something like this plugged in either natively on your motherboard or discretely soldered in on your PCB inside of your motherboard on your laptops and stuff. But it will at least allow me to have a kind of a neat testing station here if I want to see if a graphics card works, if it's bad or something. But it's kind of unfortunate. I was really hoping for better overall performance with something like this. Now I can see the benefits of it. I truly can, of turning it into a docking station. The problem is this particular unit right here costs $299. That's $300. So if you throw another 1080 in it, that's gonna be almost another $700. So you're talking about $1,000 for a situation like this to make a smaller laptop like that, well, run better, but nowhere near the performance of what you would expect if you had a discrete graphics card. In fact, even the 1080 over here, let me unplug this guy. This thing is so big. That's what she said. Anyway, the Titan, guys, this is a massive laptop. So obviously you are trading off quite a bit in terms of size and sheer performance, but look at these two together. I mean, do you see that? Do you see the stealth on the bottom there? Yeah, it really looks like, well, it kind of looks like you're watching the Nature Channel, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, yeah, it's all the performance is here on this guy, but it definitely comes at a weight disadvantage because the reality is the X Station here with a 1080 in it is about the same cost as this on top of the laptop. You could have just bought that. Now I thought that my result here might have been way off base, and I did hop on the phone with Asus, who told me that there could be up to 30 to 40% performance degradation realized depending on the graphics card that you're using, depending on the Thunderbolt switching mechanism that the laptop is using, and there's a lot of things that are at play here. There's some additional CPU overhead because the CPU is having to handle additional communication with the I/O on top of the game and on top of the graphics rendering and then display and all of that. So there's some induced latency as well as some additional CPU overhead in mind, which kind of brings up a very good point here. I'm using a 7700 HK in this laptop. That's a good laptop. It's a 7th gen, it's got hyper-threading, it's 8 threads, and it's running 3.9 gigahertz. So if you're using a slower laptop that has maybe no hyper-threading and a lower clock speed, then you're gonna see probably an even larger gap between what you would get with a discrete graphics built into the laptop versus something like this, or desktop graphics card like this in here versus in a desktop. You're going to see quite a bit of a performance degradation with something like that, which is kind of unfortunate. I think we're getting there, we're getting better at this, but unfortunately with the price of this is $299 on top of the price of whatever graphics card you're gonna put in there. So even if you put a $250 GTX 1060 in there, you're still looking at $550 for this.
And as you can see, you're still not getting the full performance of a GTX 1060. And it's even worse if you put something like a 1080 in there, because then you're talking about $1,000 for the total package price of this. And of course, you're also gaining the base station aspect of it and plugging all your devices in it, having one cable to connect everything. Personally, for me, this is now my subjective hat. This is just me talking about me and what I would do. I would not do this for a lower end laptop unless you had a laptop that has no discrete graphics in it whatsoever, and updating your laptop is completely out of the question for whatever reason, because I think it'd be better to take the $1,000 you would pay for this and a 1080 and save a little bit longer and get a better laptop, because this costs the same as this, the laptop and this station and a 1080, but it's all self-contained. Obviously, we gain a lot more weight, a lot more heft, and a lot less portability with it. So I guess that's kind of the trade-off. Anyway, guys, sound off in the comments. Tell me what you think about this. Thanks for watching. And as always, I will see you in the next video.